It's a new year and a presidential election here in the United States of America, and especially here in the battleground state of North Carolina. We talk presidential state politics today on the State of Mecklenburg at CLT Blog. To my right, one of our distinguished panelists, the Associate Professor of Politics at Catawba Colleges, Dr. Michael Bitzer. To his immediate right, Ms. Jennifer Daniels, a local progressive strategist. And to her right, the Honorable Warren Cooksey, representative from the District 7 of the Charlotte City Council and a registered Republican. So let's go ahead and just get right into it. At the end of 2011, we saw a somewhat shift in the national mood towards the Democrats and the Republicans with the passage of the unemployment extension. Do we think that that's going to have any type of negative implications for the Republicans nationally, Warren?
You got to let time pass, because what is the ultimate cliche of what we're talking about here? It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and actually it's several marathons. You have these individual items, but to try to draw a trend from a particular item, I think, is a foolish business. You've got to see what the overall trend is going, whether it's a little dip or if it presages other problems and setbacks for either side.
Right.
I mean, how much of a bounce is left from the killing of Osama bin Laden? I mean, we may hear about it again in the summertime and in the fall, but any polling impact, I think, has been wiped out. And I think the same will happen 3 months, 6 months from now regarding the unemployment insurance issue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jennifer, do you think that the Democratic Party and then most progressives are going to be able to use the passage of that extension to their benefit?
I think they will try, especially when we're having the conversation around 99%, 1%, the people versus big corporations. The other thing that they could probably use to their advantage would be just the infighting.
Right.
Kind of situation. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if that gains traction or if there will be something else,
Right.
that will come up.
I think Warren's point about the volatility of this year and last year is just, everything is all over the place. And if you look at for example, the Republican nomination battle, I mean, it's a classic roller coaster ride that we don't know where it's going to end up eventually. I think with the issues and, various things that we don't know what's coming down the pipeline,
Right.
It's certainly going to be an up in the air election year.
Well, it certainly seems that way. We've seen the Republican Party here nationally go through some swoops, especially when it comes to who they're going to as their primary. First, we saw the rise and continued ascendance of Mitt Romney. But we've also seen the rise of Rick Santorum, Herman Cain, Newt Gingrich, and several other individuals, except for poor John Husband. Poor John Husband never got a shot.
Larry, you know full well it's not been that. It's been Mitt Romney versus not Romney.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Whoever is in the not Romney position of the day is.
Yeah.
But that's the question, though. The question now is turned to the voters of South Carolina with a primary on Saturday. We've seen Mitt win, not really convincingly, but the fact that he won in Iowa was somewhat of a surprise, and won convincingly in New Hampshire. Michael, what do you think is going to happen in South Carolina on Saturday?
Well, I mean, South Carolina is very much a traditionalistic state. They prize the ability to be able to say, we are the ones who consistently since 1980 have picked the Republican nominee.
Right.
And what's really interesting is that Iowa and New Hampshire usually split their winner status.
Right.
This year, we've got Mitt Romney. Basically, Iowa's still question mark, having won the first two. Right. If he wins the first three, it is monumentally understated as to who else could beat him at this point. And I think South Carolina is going to look at it and say, he's a Mormon. We really don't feel comfortable with him on social issues. But we pick winners, and we pick the eventual nominee, and they're going to stick with that, I think.
Yeah, that's what I think it is, too. I think it's more about the race. Who can win?
Right.
Going behind the winners, like picking the winning horse as opposed to his stances on anything or his religion. And so that's going to be interesting.
The issue of electability, I think, is going to be the predominant thing, particularly when it comes to economic and jobs issues.
Well, I mean, as a Republican, Warren, do you feel an issue with Mitt Romney's religion, or do you feel that that's not going to matter when it comes down to this election?
As a Republican, I'm not supposed to feel. But anyway, stereotype aside, I don't know. I think the other tradition that we haven't discussed here that always gets discussed in this framework is that there is a Republican pattern of picking the last guy that, the guy whose turn it is.
Mm-hmm.
John McCain had tried in 2000, didn't quite make it, so it was his turn. Mitt Romney was the second guy in 08. Now it's his turn.
Right.
Is that a sense? And you get into these convoluted questions, as Michael was just talking about, of, well, do you vote for the person who you agree with, or do you vote for the person who you think is going to win because you want to make sure you voted for the winner? And that kind of talk is the kind of talk that frustrates Ron Paul supporters to no end.
Yeah.
Yes, I went ahead and invoked Ron Paul because you get into that political calculation, and it goes back to another way of phrasing it is the William F. Buckley Jr. rule that you should always vote for the most conservative electable candidate. And Romney doesn't wear the mantle of conservative very well to rank and file Republicans, but as Larry referenced, with different not Romney candidates cycling through, they haven't been grasping hold and holding on to the conservative mantle either. So maybe the calculation does become, pick the guy who gets rid of President Obama, and we can do well.
And you would think that would be the case. However, just recently we had a group of evangelicals meeting in Texas, and those individuals decided that they were going to support Rick Santorum. But what we see here today, former Speaker Newt Gingrich called on Rick Perry and Rick Santorum to drop out of the race so that he could win. With all this infighting, Jennifer, do you think that that's going to benefit the Republicans, or do you think it's going to benefit the Democrats?
Yeah, it's going to benefit the Democrats in the end, because they're looking at it now as a eating your own situation, and so it's going to benefit them. They're laying all their cards on the table. It's like we're playing poker, and you're playing with someone who doesn't know how to play, and they've laid all their hands out on the table, and now the Democrats are going to be able to kind of just pick and choose, which card they want to play. And that's, to me, I think this is the part of politics that gets me a little like, I'm a little leery about this, because you do kind of want to keep some stuff close to the vest, and you don't want to do this because you're going to have to see these folks after all of this is over with. I'm getting in just pure enjoyment out of it, to be frank with you. So, but yeah, it's going to benefit the Democrats in the long run.
Well, Warren, do you agree?
Well, I would disagree because, A, that's what I'm here to do, but also to give more substance to it. Ultimately, we can't escape the fact that the value of this, as painful as it is for Republicans to watch and as delightful as it may be for progressives to watch, the value of it is it gets all the issues out and about. As much as I detest the attacks that were done against Romney for his capitalism, because I'm a free market capitalist guy, and bang capital is what you do in this system to fix companies that are ailing. Some of them, like any surgeon, some of them make it off the operating table, some of them don't. But to see Republicans going after him for that, on the one hand, my initial reaction was, well, this is ridiculous. But on the other, now the issue's out there.
Yeah.
It is not, to Jennifer's point about the cards, every card that can be played against the Republican nominee is getting played in the primary. And that allows for the later card, since we're going to use a card metaphor. This comes up again after the nominating conventions. The card that the Republican nominee plays is, we've been over that.
Yeah.
We've done that.
I've got another analogy for you then, and I'm going to show my age. Eminem. It's kind of like the movie. Did you see 8 Mile? Where that was his strategy to say, you're going to say all these things about me anyway, so I'll say them first. So, yeah, I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
Well, Michael, being from South Carolina, being the local expert, you think Romney's going to win this? Do you think he's going to pull this out? And if he doesn't, what's going to happen then?
I cannot help but think that South Carolinians will basically fall in line instead of fall in love with Mitt. They value that sense of we coordinate the nominee eventually. Remember, Iowa and New Hampshire are swing states.
Right.
South Carolina is really the first true Republican-based state that these candidates are playing in. And so if he can continue to make a convincing case, it doesn't have to be like a New Hampshire with a 40-point win. If he can win with 30% and let the others just really badly split the social and evangelical votes, that's where his weakness is. But eventually those folks are going to come around. And we also have to remember that religious voters are not necessarily monolithic. It's not all about religion. And this year in South Carolina, it's 9.9% unemployment. They are concerned about jobs, and they want to see who's going to fix the economy. I think that plays into Romney's hands.
Well, and unknown to this, regardless of how it goes, the trend lines are showing Romney, but former Speaker Gingrich had such a great debate performance that he's trending up now, and you never know when the wave may crest. But the unknown is, while you may have folks willing to go ahead and vote for the likely winner, not the person that they care most deeply about, it is the person they care most deeply about that drives them to actually work in a campaign. To get out, to knock on to do that hard grassroots work that you rely on a base to do. And so on the one hand, you may have some folks go into the polls and say, well, I prefer Newt, Rick Santorum, Paul, but Romney's the one that's going to win, so I need to vote for him. But come October, I'm not going to knock on a lot of doors.
Where's the energy?
Will there be energy? And that's an unknown. On the other hand, with the Bain Capital bit, I'm going to steal this and use it on this show because I saw the phrase in a Jonah Goldberg column. I don't know if it's original to him, but if we do go down the path of Romney, with Romney and Bain Capital versus Barack Obama and Solyndra, it's the battle between venture capitalism and venture socialism. And that would be an interesting battle to have.
So let's play the hypothetical for North Carolina. Let's assume that Mitt Romney is the eventual nominee because over the course of time he'll win Florida. I think we all assume that he's trending well in Florida, and when he picks up Florida, that should be the end of it. None of the other candidates have enough money or time to be able to finish it out. So let's assume Romney. North Carolina, President Obama is picking up over Mitt Romney. I think it's a 2-point margin.
Yeah.
Within a 2-point margin. Yeah. So here's the question: if it's Mitt versus Barack in North Carolina, who wins, Michael?
North Carolina is that kind of center-right state, so you would expect 2008 aside to it kind of potentially return back to its Republican roots, but the grassroots organization that is already evident on the ground by the Obama campaign, the concern about the energy level that may come along with a Romney candidacy, I would have to say it's too close to call yet again. I mean, it's still, and I think it's going to be up to that point. I think North Carolina, again, remember, Obama won it by only 0.4%. And the last time it was 12 points for Bush. So he was able to make up this huge and massive ground game to get his base organized, to get it energized, to get it out. That is going to be, in my mind, the biggest question. Yeah, we're going to have ad wars galore. The money is going to get pumped in for TV commercials. But in the end, it's who shows up to vote. And right now, we got to wait and see how all this plays out. But I still say it's too close to call. And I think the polls are going to indicate that all the way up to the day of election.
I agree. I would even say ask me November 9th. And then I'll say it because I don't know. I was just as shocked. To the doctor's point, I was literally shocked like that evening, like, what, North Carolina, really? Like, oh my God, I count it, that kind of thing. Because I was really shocked. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. From what I do know, and I'm not a native North Carolinian, but I do know that this is a conservative-leaning state or center-right state. So I would not be surprised if Mitt Romney won, and that's pretty interesting because obviously the Obama campaign would have to maybe kind of redraw their map for victory. But
think about the strategy already of naming Charlotte as the DNC.
Yes.
The announcement about shortening the convention, but using that Monday as a holiday to organize. Come down from Virginia, come up from Georgia,
come up from
South Carolina. Get that grassroots energy building out, even Tennessee. I mean, and come out of that convention. If any state is prone to that kind of get the energy level up, it's right here.
Yeah, and it also speaks to moving his acceptance speech to the stadium as opposed to the arena.
Oh, you mean Bank of America?
Now that's the issue.
That's going to be because the first thing I thought was two narratives. Obviously, the first narrative he's combating is, you couldn't do a stadium again, kind of thing. So obviously he had to combat that narrative, but then just his luck, the stadium happens to be named Bank of America Stadium. So this is that in itself is going to be interesting. I'm just going to sit back and observe.
you kind of taking the wind out of my wind. No, not that. The other conversation.
Oh, no, this is.
But I was going to
take
take to the original question about whether, if Mitt Romney is the nominee, can he win North Carolina? The thing turning through my head is the fact that our primary is so late in the game, being in May, means that none of the Republican candidates really have a significant presence in this in this state. They're doing their battles to make sure that by the time it comes to North Carolina, not to our benefit, that it's settled.
Yeah.
So I would say whoever the Republican nominee, Mitt Romney or anyone, to win in North Carolina is going to have to rely on Pat McCrory's coattails.
Yeah.
That's an interesting transition because we move into that.
I was going to hand. I was
handing that to me. Segue right into the fun race.
And I do mean it that way. That given the level of organization and the history in the past, I'm interested in seeing if it's more the governor's race that provides coattails in North Carolina for the presidential race and not vice versa.
And that's
or an anchor in the case of Beverly Perdue.
Interestingly enough, we've seen just the last week several big announcements. We've seen Governor Perdue come out with her suggestion of increasing the sales tax for education.
In an election year to raise taxes, hand it to me on a silver platter, please.
And we've seen her public policy polling numbers, wow, that's wonderful. Polling. Her public policy polling numbers drop.
Say that 3 times.
That's a tough one. To the lowest numbers they've been in years.
Yeah.
And we've also seen on the Republican side for the House, a midnight session to overturn a veto, and whether or not it was a justified session, the outcry in the press was very loud. When it comes to the governor's race, how important is rhetoric going to be, and how important is organization going to be? And do you think either Bev Perdue or Pat McCrory are going to be able to prevail? Warren.
Oh, I'll go with Governor McCrory on that. The Governor McCrory idea on that one. I think what's going to, I think the message, he's got a great message to run on. He doesn't overtly have to say "I told you so," but that's going to be the gist of it. Is like, I told you so. The past 4 years, I mean, the buyer's remorse on Bev Perdue began in the polls the summer after she was elected, and she's done nothing to increase anything there. I mean, yeah, okay. Post-midnight session got bad rap in the press. Republicans never get good write-up in the press. How long does the impact of that one last? But I've lost track of where the indictments are on our fundraisers. She's suggesting a tax increase. It's going to be it's kind of like just hand it to a platter for Pat McCrory to say, the difference is leadership. Here's what I'm offering. Aren't you tired of what the past 4 years have been from the governor's mansion? And frankly, to add another one to see if that'll engender Jen to say something. Every analyst, every commentator I've heard from consistently asserts, based on research and based on the turnout, that what got Bev Perdue elected was Obama's machine.
Exactly.
Not her own.
Exactly.
Not her own.
Not her own machine, not a grassroots effort. It was Obama. So while he will be contesting the state fiercely, I think the fact that he has to contest the state fiercely is going to diminish. He won't have the same impact that he did 4 years ago, and thus Perdue won't have the same impact 4 years ago. When people made a choice of a candidate, they picked Pat McCrory. But the straight ticket voting.
Right.
That's the question. And before 2008, North Carolina was notorious. Loved to split their tickets. Vote Republican at the presidential vote. Vote Democratic at the gubernatorial. Switch back U.S. Senate. Switch back U.S. House. Love to be that kind of schizophrenic, bipolar personality that drives people like me absolutely crazy in terms of trying to understand voting behavior. What has happened now, though, in 2008 was early voting, straight ticket voting, basically confirmed that all you had to do was go in and hit 2 buttons. President Obama, Democratic straight ticket. And that, I mean, it's very rare today to say there's such a thing as presidential coattails. Well, lo and behold, in North Carolina, 2008 was a perfect example of that. The question is, can that get replicated? And can McCrory convince enough of those kind of leaning Democratic independents to say, don't vote straight ticket, but come out and do go into that split ticket phenomenon. I don't know if that's there. The other thing about Bev Perdue is her base is nowhere near what McCrory's base is right now. I mean, she's pulling about 68% of Democrats supporting her. Republicans are rallying behind McCrory at 86, and independents are 2-1 McCrory. That's a good combination for a Republican to win, but we're still 10 months out.
Right.
And again, we return to the constant issue of, was 2008
an aberration.
trend,
Yeah.
or was it just a one-off?
Or was it a time?
I'd love to hear what Jennifer
Yeah,
thinks on
and that's the. This is the scary part because I almost feel like I brought this from Michigan with me. But yes, the straight party tickets are like they almost aggravate me because you can't be that much of an ideologue where you're like, I'll just devoid all sense of responsibility and look at that. But that's what happened in 2008, and if. That could totally be a strategy when it comes to what the Democrats and the progressives do. When it comes time, that could just be the strategy. Obviously, it is what got Kay Hagan elected. It got Bev Perdue elected. It got quite a few people elected. The further down the ballot is concerned, and so that is why I think I'm really confused as to. Well, not confused. I'm kind of split in the. Who will win? Who will it be? Perdue? Will it be McCrory? Because both have negatives, both have positives. Obviously, her polling numbers are atrocious. Her favorability is atrocious in the state, and just like Warren said, it literally months after in the job, here her numbers start to go down. Yet in the same token, Pat McCrory is moving further and further to the right, and it's putting a funny taste in some folks' mouths because people kind of thought that he was a Republican in name only,
mainstream
and
Republican.
or more moderate.
Well, let me forward you some emails as to whether McCrory's really going to the right or not.
And that's going to be the question here. The question that I think is ultimately going to decide this race, and you can agree or disagree, but I'd love to hear what you think. Of course you disagree. Grassroots. Grassroots activism has proven as a successful model in North Carolina for 2008. In Charlotte, in history, grassroots activism has not been as big a deciding factor. It was in 2011. Will grassroots activism continue to be the standard? If you win grassroots, you win. Or are we going to see a shift back to the Jesse Helms days of if you get on TV and get on TV hard, that's going to win, Jennifer?
Yeah. I would like to think that the grassroots efforts are what's going to do it. Folks are, there's just a tenor around people that I know of, some things need to change, and maybe this is the thing that's finally getting folks off of their lazy duffs, to go and do things. However, we cannot ignore or discount Citizens United and the money that's going to be funneled into this. So it's just going to be a battle of wills to me. It's just whoever is the strongest will come out.
See, progressive strategists calls people lazy.
Listen, that's why I said we agree on quite a few things.
Yeah.
But, I'm not talking about a specific person.
No. I would never say in front of a camera with a microphone live in front of me that voted.
Oh goodness! Listen, it's when you look at voter turnout. I mean, hello.
In 2011, it was.
Yeah, that's come on. We need to do better.
What helps make that a question, for an academic to just salivate over about the data you're going to get, is that, to Larry's point about the aerial bombardment of TV ads, it's going to be heavy because we've got the Citizens United case, and we're seeing that in the Republican primary, where the independent groups are spending tons of money already, and they will be spending tons of money on both sides as well. So to what extent, I have to wonder, will that all just by September, October of 2012, just be so much noise to the voter, and it will require the call of a live human voice to the phone, the knock of a live human being at the door to really make the difference in turning the people out for whichever side is trying to win it most.
If you look at South Carolina right now, they're predicting anywhere from $20 to $25 million being spent in this primary just on advertisements, okay?
Probably still less than potato chip advertising.
I know, and I tell that to my students and their jaw drops. But I think 2012 is going to become the perfect storm. You've got the amount of money coming in, we have no idea through the Citizens United, but we've also got the attempt at grassroots mobilization. Those two combined, presents an environment that it could be anybody's ball game in this regard. And I think, and particularly in this kind of a state, predictions are going to be very dangerous come the fall.
And that's what's going to be the scary part too, is because folks are going to be looking to us to make these predictions. Well, what do you think? What do you think?
Oh, yeah.
And this is
we're going to have to throw hands.
We're going to say we don't know. And you're right, Warren, in the sense of the messages negating each other, because it will do that. It will be considered noise, and it will just, people will begin to tune it out. With all this newfangled technology of fast forwarding and TiVo, people will tune it out, and so it will eventually get down to the grassroots game, and then we'll see what happens. But it'll be an enjoyment just to watch that.
And interestingly enough, to that idea of predictions, not asking for a prediction, asking for your thoughts. North Carolina House, North Carolina Senate, first time in over 100 years. I believe it's 100 and ever.
Roughly 140
first time ever,
is the number.
That the Republicans have controlled the House and the Senate. Based upon what we're seeing right now, if things continue, do you anticipate that the Democrats are going to pick up one chamber, two chambers, or no chambers? Michael?
If the current maps hold, and they're in the court system, but if the current maps hold, my prediction is the Republicans have drawn enough safe and potentially leaning districts that they could hold on to both chambers, even in a high turnout Democratic year. If you get to draw the rules of the game, you get to determine who wins the game.
Right.
And that I will give all due credit. I mean, they've basically got 72 seats in the House pretty much locked up. They don't even need to win the competitive seats. They can hand off the safe Democratic seats. And in the Senate, I would say at least 30 seats. And that's a 4-seat cushion right there.
Jennifer?
I'd say both. I'd say the Republicans will keep both. And oddly enough, even though I said I was confused, I think the gubernatorial race will go Democratic again. And then that'll just be very contentious, but we'll see.
Well, obviously, I'm a McCrory supporter and want to see Pat be the next governor. And I think what we need to throw into that from the legislative perspective is, regardless of how many seats are out there drawn safe one side or the other, competitive, I think with Tom Tillis on the House side, Phil Berger and Bob Rucho on the Senate side, you've got folks who know that, yes, they need as many seats as possible, but they need fewer if it's a Republican governor. And so I think you'll see some interest, and I'm just speculating based on our conversation here, I think you'll see some perhaps additional efforts to go ahead and turn out as many voters as possible in even safe legislative seats for Republicans to help give that cushion. Because to your point about 72 in the House and all, what has been frustrating for Republican leadership in the House so far is that they don't quite have the veto-proof majority.
Right.
Over in the Senate, Republicans have got whatever, they've got it and they need it. The House, they've had to make some compromises to get 5 Democrats to come along, and they've done so on a number of occasions, but not on all. Voter ID, for example, a passionate issue amongst the Republican Party and an issue that in polls Democrats and Republicans agree by a significant margin should be there, is going to require in North Carolina either supermajorities in both chambers or a Republican governor. I mean, that's all there is to it.
So they'll hold.
So I think both chambers and the governor's mansion, and good times will return.
Well, all right then. I want to thank my panel for joining me today. It was wonderful of you guys to come on up here and do this. So we're going to have to do it again here very shortly, and we're going to move to a final segment here called Last Word. It's a new segment where I get to have the last word.
Oh, that's why you didn't tell us.
No, and I enjoy it. But in this segment, we're basically going to talk about what's going to be happening here locally. And we have to make sure that we understand, folks, that coming up very shortly is going to be an election that's going to change everyone's lives. It's going to set the tenor of the tone for the country. Whether you're a Republican or a member of the Democratic Party, please get involved. Please get educated, and please go out and vote. This is too important to your future and your children's futures to not pay attention and to not get involved. So thank you once again for joining us here at the State of Mecklenburg on CLT Blog. We hope to see you again very soon.